Welcome to Dreamers and Creators. This is Anand Rao, your host from our IndusTV offices in Princeton. In Dreamers and Creators, we bring you stories of exemplary business leaders in the United States, but having roots in India and the South Asian subcontinent. So here we have with us today, Suuchi Ramesh. Suchi, welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure and appreciate you having me here.
Suchi epitomizes the theme behind Dreamers and Creators. She's a dreamer and she created an extraordinary business right here in the United States. Suchi was born and raised in Chennai, and then she moved to Bangalore as a teenager. And then she established this company called Suchi Inc. It's a supply chain technology platform that facilitates end-to-end supply chain management for a range of industries. So before we get to the business side of things, Suchi, I would like to talk to you about your background, right? Your early education and your roots in Chennai. Not many people know that you come from a family of extraordinary entrepreneurs. And but yet you moved to Bombay for an MBA. After your engineering in Bangalore at the Bangalore Institute of Technology, and then you came to the US as an IT professional, like a lot of us. Tell us about your early influences and your childhood and your journey up to that point.
Yes, I mean, I was lucky, I suppose, to have a STEM background, and it's quite funny, but it's also amazing, right? You know, I'd say 90% of the Indian Americans you meet here have a background in technology. Which I did, and I enjoyed that. I think that was very influential in defining the path, for sure. And also, I think it's always easy to define that in retrospect, but a background being raised in India, especially the south of India, I think the schooling, now that I've had the luxury of comparing it with different schooling systems, I think that really sets you apart. When you've had education in the south of India, the emphasis on math and science is a huge advantage. And then from a family standpoint, while it's a cliche, my parents are definitely hugely influential. And not just in whatever they did overtly in the way they raised us, but in observing them. My mom is a fabulous teacher. She's an economist and been with the same school for almost 40 years. So the traditional path where she started with an institution stayed with them. And my dad is the son of a very successful entrepreneur. And he and his siblings, I know they tried different things, which some of it worked, some of it didn't. So I saw both success and attempts that were not as successful. And it was good to see both sides of it. And suppose I always had an itch to try and do my own thing. And moving to the United States was a tremendous opportunity, not just in providing me the avenues and the platforms to be with some tremendous companies. I was with Intel, which is a huge corporate, but then I joined two different venture-backed tech companies in the predictive data analytics space. So seeing fast growth up close was great, and I got into sales, which I think is huge advantage when you want to start your own company. And seeing fast growth companies up close and the culture that makes up these companies. But I think more than anything, when you take that risk or the opportunity, depending on how you look at it, to move homes and to move countries, I think it defines who you are as a person. You've moved as well, and I think it takes a certain kind of person and a certain kind of courage to do that, which itself influences your path after that.
You raised a very important point, risk. You know, that word really caught me on risk when you talk. You may not agree with me, or maybe you would agree with me, that us South Indians, mainly, most of us Indians, we are risk averse. We tend to kind of veer towards the safer side. And to be an entrepreneur, to start something on your own, it is definitely venturing into that risky territory. Nothing can be hunky-dory all the time. It is diving into the world of uncertainty. Now, let's say, for example, Suchi, the company Suchi, in a very short time, you have accomplished some very rare goals, right? In 2018, you were the Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year in New Jersey. And in 2019, you received a $8 million investment from Edison Partners, right? A Princeton-based equity firm, not far from here. And then in 2020, you won the Women in IT Awards. You were named in the Entrepreneur of the Year category for New York, which is amazing for the in a short time. So, tell me something. Was you venturing into risk fed by the desire for these successes, or did they act as more of a incentive for you to continue going?
Yes, I mean, success is, it's great to get these stamps of approval, but in having lived through the journey of building a company, you realize, and this isn't just an attempt to sound humble, but it's the reality. I think anybody that builds a business knows that these are external stamps of approval mean little, right? It's building a business is a lot of ups and there's a lot of downs. And it's so success is a very nebulous thing. You have to define that for yourself. It could be a bunch of different things, but for me, it is the joy and the thrill of building something, and it is the joy and the thrill of controlling my own path and defining my destiny. And to me, so that's why, if you go back to your question on risk, I think when I started the company, it came to I think it's riskier. For me, right, for the kind of person I am, to be employed or to have somebody else define what my path is going to be. And actually, I think it's less risky. Of course, there is a risk, a quantified risk to a business not being successful, and there's a very high risk of a business not being successful. But in terms of defining my own path, it's less risky for me to be able to steer the boat, right? So that to me is what is success, is the ability to have an idea, execute against it, and the joy and the thrill of building towards it. And with that comes more failures than successes, right?
Right.
So it's never a straight line.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but yes, very fortunate to have had these stamps of approval, to be one of the few early stage venture backed tech companies by a very reputable firm, to have had these awards and these grants. So we're very fortunate.
I'll go back again in time a little, and now, your family own the Enfield motorcycles, right? It's one of the most iconic brands in India, the Bullet motorcycles. It's become ubiquitous now. You could have easily jumped into the family business. Am I wrong in that, or?
Well, it wasn't. That background did not have much of an impact when I was growing up. What I mean by that is, I think I do recollect very clearly spending time with my grandfather, and the man that my dad is also, he's influenced by that background. But that business had some trouble in the 90s, and it was eventually sold. So we didn't really have the opportunity to be a part of it, because when it started having trouble, the family sold it. But having said that, I think what helped me was see the other side of it, right? Which was, growing up, I didn't see the successful side of it. I really saw what happened with the next generation, which was my father's generation. They tried to create their own identity, if you would, outside of that. And I watched my dad really closely. So, he's a man of intelligence, but tried his hand at many things. So I wasn't that ecosystem or the success that they had. I was kind of removed from that, just because I was a couple of generations removed from the big success that they saw.
While I was doing some research about you online, I found that somewhere you mentioned that your grandma had a very important role in your upbringing. She was your mentor. Can you tell us a little about that?
Yes, I mean, she's my maternal grandmother, my mother's mother. So she's good job with the research. So I think I probably was mentioned that a while ago, but she's still she just is past 85 now, but the woman is incredible. She's insane in all the good ways, very well ahead of her times. She was highly educated for her time, and very, very ambitious. So she would always push me, and she had a tremendous amount of unshakable faith in me. I think that's all grandparents perhaps, but she took it to another level. With grandparents, I suppose, especially with her, just unconditional love, unconditional praise, and just a belief that I would go on to do great things. And when you keep hearing that as a mantra over and over again when you're growing up, it's good to know that you have that kind of cushion, right? That fallback. And so, I've been very lucky to have that in her. So she's an inspiration. She was, she worked as a bank. She was the principal of a school for many years, for decades. And very liberated woman, very intelligent, very well read, ahead of her times. 50 years ago, ahead of her times today.
Wonderful. I'm sure she'll be very proud of you today.
She says that irrespective, right? So even if I was selling bananas on the side of the road, she'd still be proud of me.
That's wonderful. So I also read during my research that you were very close to making a move to North Carolina. You have a very successful setup now in New Jersey. That New Jersey is your home. You live in New Jersey. Your business is set up in New Jersey, and most of the people you've hired come from New Jersey. There was a time when you contemplated a move to North Carolina before a very important milestone happened, which I would let you talk about it.
Yeah, so we've had, as like all early stage businesses, we've had some evolutions over the history of our company, and all towards a greater end, I would say, or a greater, better path. So we began as a tech-enabled manufacturing service, and I'm a technologist by background, so we wanted to build a software product that could be a dominant in an industry where it's really an oligopoly. There's some big players that have run supply chain software, but there's really nothing new, lightweight, both in terms of usage, UI, as well as price point. But we had to start somewhere because the vision was fairly grand. So we began as a marketplace or a manufacturing service, and we gave the software in beta mode because to increase adoption, we didn't charge for the software. But those early years, we actually ran and operated our own factory, and then we also connected the software to a multitude of factories, and so we provided a flex manufacturing capacity to brands that were working with us. So when we were running the factory, a number of employees grew really fast as a function of that. So on the one hand, we had our engineers, on the other hand, we had operators on the sewing floor. And because we had a huge number of employees in that model, taxes and the cost of operating in New Jersey started to get very expensive. And so we were considering a move just from an expense standpoint, given the high number of folks we had on our team, as well as the overhead of operating. But we eventually decided not to.
Okay, so what happened was in August 2018, you received a grant from the New Jersey Economic Development Authority, a grant worth $37.7 million.
Yes.
And that should have definitely been a big shot in the arm and your expansion. Now, I don't even know how many employees are there. I saw somewhere that you had 130, but you had plans of expanding to 400. How many employees work for Suchi now?
So so again, because of the change in business model, our number of employees have actually reduced because now we're a pure software company. Okay. So we at some point, which is always a part of the plan, decided to make a shift towards focusing on the software and reducing our effort on the manufacturing service component. So with that, the grant was is a promise of a certain amount of funding that can be applied. I don't entirely understand how it works because we never realized that grant, right? Okay. So because of the shift in the business model, we're now a team of engineers, sales and marketing folks, and product or software product folks. So the grant was great. It allowed us to stay back in New Jersey and build our software outfit in New Jersey. But we chose to not realize the grant because it was not the right thing to do, especially because we weren't adding employees on the side of the business that we had really received the grant for.
That's very interesting because I look at your timeline here. You have Suchi Grid. That's your platform, the
Yes.
Suchi Grid.
Yes.
So it's used by companies across 20 different industries that does end-to-end supply chain.
Yes.
It's amazing. But then your grid development began in 2017.
Correct.
And then you moved to you had your Series A round come through in 2019.
Yes.
But then from that point you shifted to software as a service model,
Yep.
which is rather in reverse gear compared to other organizations. Like organizations usually start off as a SaaS and then they move to a product. But you, with your product and a platform, you move to a service.
Well, no, it is a software product. It just called SaaS is software, right? You're delivering the software instead of giving it as a license.
Okay.
SaaS just means you're delivering the software product as a subscription.
As a service,
so it's still a software product, right?
Okay.
So so that's one and the same. But we always had the software product being used by our marketplace customers. We just weren't commercializing the software side because we felt it was very important to gain a lot of usage and adoption and feedback on the product before we started, before we carved the product out on its own and then introduced that to market. So the product has been in use, or the software product has been in use since 2017 by the early customers, and then we eventually and very organically carved it out as a piece of its own.
So from 2017 to now, the world has seen a lot of changes. Business has gone through a sea change.
Yeah.
So has your positioning and progress of the technology changed along with? I'm pretty sure there should be a lot of changes from 2017 to this day.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we have invested a ton of time, resources, energy, feedback into the software product. We're tremendously excited and confident that this is going to be a defining software platform of the future. And yes, I mean, I can't even begin to describe or summarize all the changes since 2017, but at the high level, a lot of our early customers were also startups, versus we've transitioned to also having a lot of enterprise companies use the platform. We started with fashion as our primary industry vertical of focus. Today we have 20 industries using the software platform, and there's many different use cases. So the platform has grown in strength both in terms of the length of supply chain assets it can manage, inbound, midstream, downstream, but also in the depth, which is the core functionality that you can use to manage any particular part of the supply chain. But having said that, usability, user interface, and workflow and user experience is very critical. So we were really over-indexed on that. And so the goal and the balance has been, while we've built out, gone wider, deeper, we've also needed to keep it really simple. So so all of that has happened, and I continue to be so excited about the potential of the software platform. We're seeing it. We've realized some of that already, and this is just a start.
Amazing. Now, the industries that you work with, I got you're in apparel, you're in fashion, you're in footwear, you're in kitchen utensils. So these are all very traditional industries.
Yes.
They have their own traditional methods and technologies, and there are different generations of people managing these different functions.
Yeah.
So how did you manage to kind of convince them that they need to go to this new grid, Suchi grid? Because for a little bit of change management that I am aware of, it's people are happy doing their little Excel spreadsheet. If you give them an algorithm, they're like, this is going to totally disrupt my life in a wrong way. I'm not going to do it. So how did you? I'm sure you would have faced a lot of those challenges. How did you manage to sell them on those? Yeah, one is the bottom line. It definitely affects it. But then, what else do you think?
Well, you're right. You caught that right. With traditional industries, it's not easy, and it continues to be a challenge. But we're also seeing that there's this new generation of companies that are going to be tomorrow's billion-dollar brands. They're not there yet, but we're seeing this new crop of leadership. It's very exciting. So if you look at some of the fastest-growing consumer product companies, the leadership in these companies, they come with a background in tech, or they come with a background in marketing technology, and they understand the importance of something simple, lightweight, but also comprehensive, a single source of truth that can help cushion as well as strengthen their fast growth. So I think one set of our customers really that those partnerships have been forged on because we've had leaders on the other side that recognize the importance of change in their tech stack. And then even with traditional companies, we see that they're bringing on innovative leaders. So a big part of crossing that chasm, if you will, using the very important phrase that's important in software, right? Is this how do you go from those first set of customers to really launching across industries? a big part of helping with crossing that chasm. One part of it is how does your software platform continue to develop with respect to the feature set, but the other side is, I think, finding the innovators and the leaders in these organizations that want change, right? So you really have to search out the innovators on the other side, and we've been somewhat successful in doing that. And I suppose when you find enough innovators, then you slowly become a brand name that's recognized in the supply chain space, and that's our goal as we think about the next couple of years.
And one more thing I really wanted to ask you was your views on outsourcing, because that's something you've not done. You don't believe in it. Most Indian companies that I know are companies with CEOs of Indian origin tend to outsource all their work to India, a lot of operations to India. But you have kept it 100% in the US.
Yes.
So you are a model citizen. A large percentage of your employees come from different nationalities. It's like 80% of your employees are from 27 different nationalities. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, that was also a statistic that's a little old now, because that was a statistic from when we had our manufacturing service arm and our software product, versus now it's the team that really comprises the software product team. But we're still diverse, right? And so we may not have as many nationalities, but we're still diverse. I don't, keeping all the development or the engineering development in-house has been more of a it's a strategic decision. We do have a small team in India. It's a small team. 95% of the engineering is done in-house. And so, your observation is right, but to me, it's so important that we're nimble, we're agile, we're reacting quickly to customers, and it's not just the engineering of the software product; it's also the success, right? It's how do you keep them happy, how do you listen to what they want, and at this stage, we're still a young company, so being able to speak to the customer in their time zone. Being able to apply thought leadership and understanding of their business and match that with the strength of the software product, all that is important. And there's tremendous advantages that come from having that all that knowledge in-house. I think down the road, expanding, there's also merit in outsourcing some of this. It's I believe it could be tremendous just with respect to having leaner financials or having a leaner cost mechanism. But for us right now, that control and keeping things closer to home or at home has had a huge advantage in our ability to service customers.
It's a very interesting approach. And then you were also mentioning about the hiring bias in startups, right? So you're saying young leaders need not necessarily be young at age, right? Yeah. It's being young at heart. So, and startups typically try to load their companies with young people. Now, even look at the Googles and Facebooks of the world. They like to have 20-year-olds working for them, even in senior positions.
Yep.
But you have pretty strong opinions about that. Love to hear about it.
Yeah, it's not that I think that you should only hire folks with decades of experience. I think it's about saying there's a balance that's required, right? And balance is about balance in gender, and balance in cultural background, balance in years of experience. You can't force that. You can hire just to hit that balance statistic. But when you do balance, you see outcome accordingly, and it's a huge positive outcome. So we have heads of some of our departments that are in their 20s, and we have heads of some of our departments that have each 30, 35 years of experience, right? It just who's the best person for the job. And it just happens to be that some of the folks that are best for that job are in their 20s, and some of them are about 30 years older than that, right? So for me to have that diversity on my executive team helps me be a better leader, right? So I have some cutting edge ideas, and younger leaders are typically not shackled by constraints because they're approaching things fresh, tend to be a little more innovative and higher tolerance to risk. Versus some folks that have experience, have seen patterns, they have pattern recognition, and that's very helpful as well.
That's a wonderful thought. You just said, diversity should not just be because of affirmative action. It should also be for desired outcomes of. That's a wonderful thought, and also it should lead to equity eventually. You are very strong on work culture, right? So, what's the typical work culture? How would you define it in Suchi? Is it a participatory? Is it egalitarian? Well, what work culture do you instill in your company?
Well, I hope that the way I view it is how everyone on the team views it as well. But yes, I mean, I'd say it's a culture where we all speak up. We're all driving towards, we have one vision and one goal, and in order to meet that, we disagree, which is healthy. We have, it's a culture where we question. It's a meritocracy. We value old-fashioned principles. We work hard, and then I'd say that one of the things that's been fairly organic is we went from being an in-office the whole day, 5 days a week culture to being now fully remote, and that's been great because it's and then with that the transition to mainly focusing on our software, right? So the makeup of what we do every day, it works well with the remote culture as well. So we're more focused on, like I said earlier, we're more focused on outcome, the quality of the work, and are we driving towards the goals that we have. And with that there comes a little more flexibility as well.
Let me ask you about your life as an employee, because you were an employee for many years too. So, as an Indian woman in the United States, you were working in the technology area, which is quite common to find people from India there. But what was your experience working? Do you recall anything fondly? Do you recall anything? Were you disappointed with something, or is there something you wish you could go back and change when you were working? If you were given an opportunity to go back and head the organization you were working for, what would you change?
Well, first of all, I think there were a lot of positives. I'll start with that. I was in sales roles with the company I was with before Suchi Inc. I was brought on to really head their sales organization for the Americas. This was a company that had presence in Asia and Europe, but it was virgin ground for them in the Americas. So to go from a background in coding and analytics, from a background in technology, and just as a software engineer, and then with a master's in software, I started off on the technical side, but I think I was really lucky to move to sales. And that's not a very commonly found combination. If you start off on the engineering background, you stay there. But I realized I loved sales, and I was lucky to have the opportunity to move to a leadership position there. And that in combination with the fact that I'd also moved to the country. I was an immigrant. I am an immigrant. So all that set me up well to have the courage to start something on my own. But when I wanted to make changes, and I wanted to drive change, it was difficult to do that. And I don't necessarily think it was because I was a woman. I think there's just, even though it was a startup in the US, it was still an organization that was pretty large. They did have centers in other countries. So driving change takes time, right? You have to go through layers, and I started to get really frustrated. And at some point you hit a ceiling, or you start to find yourself hitting a ceiling against what your own goals are. Now, that my hitting a ceiling may not be a situation everybody else may find themselves in if they had been doing what I was doing. I think having a job, having that certainty, you shouldn't underestimate that. I saw my mom do that, and she wouldn't have it any other way. She was in the same institution. There was predictability, and that predictability gave her a lot of joy and happiness. So I think entrepreneurship sometimes is really glamorized, and I think that's incorrect, because snatching that predictability away is not for everybody, right? And I think you have to draw joy and confidence from the fact if you have that self-awareness that you want that predictability. But for me, that predictability, it didn't give me enough joy to overcome the angst and the frustration I felt from not having control of driving changes.
Wow, there was some quotable quotes in there. If you were to advise young girls who have, even young men too, who have moved to the US, or they're growing up here, and they have strong parental influences, not the kind you had, but the kind of influences that will kind of pull them down and say you got to remain anchored to a certain predictable path, whereas they have their dreams to kind of take on their own path. How would you advise, and what would your advice be?
Taking on, I think some of it is what I said. Taking on your own path starts with some self-awareness. What is your path? Is it achievement from being with an organization and jumping up layers, which is a beautiful path in and of itself? Or are you the kind of person that wants to try something on your own, but are also aware and okay if it fails, right? So I think it starts with asking those questions, because there's no point in just doing something for the sake of it because people around you are doing that. And entrepreneurship is not easy. It comes with a lot of failures. It comes with a lot of heartache. It comes with a lot of compromises and sacrifice, right? So, but if whatever that path is, and if entrepreneurship is that, and I know that a lot of Indian parents value the security and the stability, well, I think it's about saying, I'm very close to my parents, and I think I feel that sense of responsibility. All Indian parents, especially, I'm a firstborn, right? So I do. But I also equally recognize that there's only one person in the world I'm accountable to, and that's myself, right? And I think, as long as you have that clearly, and if you could stare yourself in the mirror and say that this is what I want to do, then you owe it to yourself to do that, and you owe it to yourself to invest in yourself and to take those risks.
There are two things, right? On one side, people say, if you're passionate about something, go after it like your life depends on it.
Yeah.
And the second part is that make sure that you have something to fall back on.
Yes.
Make sure that there is a plan B.
Yeah.
Do you think these two are contradictory to each other?
Maybe, I don't know. I have a different take on both those statements, right? So one, passion is overused, it's abused, that word. I don't know what passion is, right? Do something you're passionate about. I mean, if I go say that to a young person, what the hell does that mean, right? I think it's about learning, and I often talk about the flow diagram, right? Mihail Csikszentmihalyi is, most folks would have heard of him, but there's a skill level, and then there's the demand level or the challenge level, right? So if you draw a diagonal, you always want your challenge level to be a little higher than your skill level, and that's not a constant, because your skill level improves, and then you want the challenge level to keep improving as well. So you always want that level of challenge to be a little higher than your level of skill at that point in time. And as long as you're there, that's the place you always want to be, right? Yep. Because you're pushing yourself. And data says this, but I've experienced this myself, that I am in a state of well-being or feeling charged up when I'm in that place, right? So I think that's what I would say is, it's not about passion, but if I had to dive and give somebody clarity on what that is, always ensure that your level of demand or challenge is higher than your present level of skill, right? But then for having something to fall back on, what is that, right? So if that's financial, or the funny thing about entrepreneurship is one of the end outcomes is wealth creation, right? But in order to get there, you have to be comfortable with losing everything. So to me, it's about the experience. It's about the person building exercise it becomes, right? Who is the person I become in the process of building, and that is my fallback, right? My fallback is my character set building, is my value system building. I'm driving from the point of values and the point of principles. And if I do that, and if I never give up, the wealth will come. But my fallback is, what am I learning, right? It's the experience of it. That's my fallback. So again, it's about defining your fallback more in terms of the experiential and who it makes you become. Because if you become stronger and more solid, right, there's no stronger fallback than that.
So when you were a little girl growing up in Chennai, or maybe a teenager in Bangalore, what was your ambition? Well, where did you see yourself as an adult?
I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. That I was pretty clear about. In my head, I would
but
always.
You definitely didn't want to be in a supply chain management.
No, I didn't have clarity on that. I think perhaps that was influenced by kind of growing up, watching my dad's side, or I do recollect always being competitive and ambitious and wanting to do my own thing. I don't think I had a clear idea what that meant, right? I think in my head I would always dream of starting this or starting that. But yeah, I definitely didn't have clarity on what that was. It was just very vague and nebulous.
There is also this area of knowledge, right? You are in the data business. You every day you generate tons and tons of data in your business, and so I'm pretty sure the entrepreneur in you and the technologist in you is already thinking of how this data can be used in the future. Can you spill a little bit of those secrets as to what's going to happen with all that knowledge that's accumulated in your organization?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the data is very exciting. It's also it's very critical to each of the organizations they work with, right? There's a confidentiality part of it. So it's very important that whatever our goals are with the data, that the architecture of the system and the philosophy of what we're trying to build completely respects. The first thing is respecting the confidentiality of the data by customer. But yeah, having said that, there's tremendous value in the analytics that we can get out of this data. First of all, we're connecting more data sets across a wider length of the supply chain than any other company has been able to do in the past. Because we connect the whole length of the supply chain, and the length is defined by the company. You can start as upstream, your tier 2, tier 3 suppliers start with that product design, costing, purchase orders, all the way down to inventory tracking to your customers' doors. And then we also integrate with the underlying system. So the amount of data we're capturing, the variety of that data, structured and unstructured, it's colossal. And the power of driving insights to business leaders is tremendous, because never before have we connected this many data sets. So one is just providing for every individual customer based on their individual data store, because we're connecting all these data sets, giving them insights as to, oh, by the way, this you've had delays with your customer, but where in the supply chain is the root of that problem? Or here's the current speed of your product being delivered, but based on all the other data we have, if you switched your factory from factory A to factory B, your supply chain speed would increase, say, by 20% for this product, right? So insights like that they didn't have at their fingertips before that. Then the second level of that becomes we anonymize and aggregate data across data sets. Of course, customers give their approval on that because we're anonymizing it, because now we're gathering data across different customers of the same industry. And we're then able to provide trends on industry best practices, and so companies can compare against that, right? So what's the average supply chain time? What's the average vendor rating? What are the kind of product categories that are trending well in terms of sales? And so insights like that allow you best practices to compare with. And then there's the third tier of that is, of course, then you start getting into some really great predictive insights as well, right? So being able to predict the future and giving insights to these companies. So yeah, I mean, the potential is just tremendous, and we're very excited about that. We're just starting to scratch the surface of that right now. It's about collecting all of the data, but yeah, we're taking some steps towards providing more insights to customers. And I think even from a monetization capability of monetization, there's a lot that we can do. We're very excited about it.
So where does Suchi go from here? The Suchi, the organization, how do you envision Suchi grow in the next 5 years, 10 years?
So we want to become the next dominant in this market. There's some big names, there's SAP and Navision and a NetSuite, and we want to be the next name out there. We have a distinct positioning for ourselves, which is that we're the next generation supply chain system that's lighter weight, that gives you that one single source of truth. And I don't think any other system out there has that same positioning. And so we want to become the household name. When I say household name, within the households of these companies, right, where they know that they have to change their tech stack, they have to make some changes to it, and we become the go-to platform for them.
Do you miss manufacturing?
So we are not away from manufacturing. We just don't have our own in-house factory yet. One of the solutions under our software platform is a marketplace.
Okay.
So it's we have many different products under our platform. One of the products is a marketplace. So we still connect brands with factories. The only difference is we just don't run and operate our own factory anymore. we're still very much in the world of manufacturing because we connect factories to brands. And there's a lot of factories that are a part of the network of our customers that plug into our software platform. I mean, that those are the roots, and we're still very deeply involved in the world of manufacturing.
But you mentioned that you don't have the number of people working there anymore. So
Yes.
did you
We don't have the sewing team anymore.
Yeah, did
Correct.
you have to downsize them, or did you reallocate them, or?
Yeah, we helped some of our managers start off their own factories. We also helped set them up. So we tried to do the best that we could to reallocate those folks, and quite a few of them are working with the managers that were a part of our team before. They've spun off into their own factories.
That's an amazing gesture. In fact, I'm glad that I asked that question, because it's very easy for somebody to just who is listening to you say that, oh yeah, they moved away from manufacturing, and what happened to those 200 people working for them? They were all let go, or
Yeah.
they lost their jobs overnight, but you actually found them work.
Yes,
that's wonderful.
we did the best that we could. We had some really great talent, especially with some of the leadership on our manufacturing floor. So 2 of them specifically started their own factories, and through our marketplace we still send them work as well. But they were able to employ a significant chunk of employees that were with us.
That's great. Now let's talk a little about Suchi, the person. What do you do for fun?
So I read a lot. And I like to stay fit, exercise quite a bit.
What do you read?
Mostly nonfiction, not mostly, only nonfiction, but I love biographies. I just love reading about other entrepreneurs, business books.
Which one's your favorite?
Oh, there's so many of them. Let's see, I can tell you what I'm reading, right now. I'm reading Stephen Schwarzman's What It Takes, the CEO of Blackstone. There's a lot of financial nuggets in there. It's also a learning exercise. I just finished Michael Dell's new book. The name of the book is, slipping my mind right now, but that was the book I finished just before this, and it just talks about his very unique experience. Took Dell, Dell was private, went public, took it private, went back public, so there's that dance, and there was a lot of intricacies involved with that. So that was a great book. Before that, this book has been around for some time, but I just hadn't had a chance to read it. Tools of Titans, Tim Ferriss. So he puts together the tools and the go-to methods for success across a whole variety of achievers. Not just in business, but also sports and media. So I'm trying to read and listen to podcasts every chance that I get. I stay fit. I'm a new mom. I have a 7-month-old at home.
Wow, 7-month-old. Awesome.
Yes,
yeah.
so that keeps me busy and gives me a lot of joy.
What's her name? Him?
Her name is Arya.
Arya.
Yes, Arya, and she is absolutely the joy of our lives. She's beautiful, and we're very fortunate and lucky.
And you did mention your husband's an entrepreneur too.
Yes, my partner is also an entrepreneur. He is second. His dad is Cuban, his mom is Chinese, so it's very unique.
Cuban
mix.
Chinese.
Yes,
okay.
And his parents started a company which he now runs. So I've learned a lot from his parents and him. He's got a tremendous work ethic. So I have a lot to learn and pick up from people around me.
That's amazing. So you were born into a family of entrepreneurs, and you continue to live the life of an entrepreneur, and you've surrounded yourself with successful entrepreneurs. So that's an amazing story. And you mentioned about working out and your fitness and everything. So now that it's a post-COVID era where everyone's working from home, what's a typical day look like?
Well, obviously, big part of my day is working. I wake up and I start work right away. And pretty much work through the day. I'm lucky to have some help at home with the baby, but I zone myself into the office area because you need that sanctity. And but yeah, at the end of the day, and sometimes during the day, I take pockets out for fitness, and it's a combination of cardio and just some stretches and floor exercises using my body weight. All of us have had to change our exercise routines because you're not going to the gym anymore. And then in the evenings, of course, I try to spend quality time with my daughter, and then once she's sleeping, read a little bit. And then when I'm also working out, I'm listening to podcasts. So one of the great things about the new forms of books are you could listen to your books while reading them. So I alternate. So I do try to, catch up with my reading when I'm through the audiobooks when I'm exercising as well. So my days are very boring in a good way. I'd like to think of it as a good way. It's I have to pick and choose what I want to focus on, because if I spread myself too thin, I'm not going to be able to do anything well. So it's really work, home, family, and then catching up on my reading.
So Suchi, it was fabulous having you in our
Thank
studios.
you. I appreciate it.
It was a wonderful chat.
Thank you.
And we wish you all the best. And you're already accomplished much, and we wish you would accomplish a lot more. And we are very proud of you. And we look forward to seeing more great things from Suchi, the person as well as the organization.
Thank you.
Good luck with everything.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Friends, that's our first dreamer and creator, Suuchi Ramesh, founder and CEO of Suchi Inc. So we are stories like these we keep bringing you in Dreamers and Creators. Stay tuned. Me, your host Anand Rao from our studios in IndusTV, Princeton, New Jersey. Signing off. Subscribe to us on YouTube, IndusTV. Like us on Facebook. And see you soon.